Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm your host, Richard Dugan, and I thank you so much for joining us on the radio broadcast at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on a Sunday and Monday mornings at 1 a.m. The broadcast podcasts are available on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, as well as richarddugan.com, the homepage, as well as the radio show's page. And we encourage you, if you can, to support us financially to keep the programs moving forward and take care of all of the ancillary things through PayPal and Patreon accounts. They are for your security as well as ours. We hope that you will do your part and do what you can if you feel led to do so. We'll even take energetic support as well. And we also encourage you to go to our guest's website. We'll be giving you that during the interview so that you can continue your evolutionary process. We also encourage you to spend time in meditation, in prayer, in just quiet time during 2020, the year of perfect vision, and the 2020s, the decade of perfect vision. And we hope that you will do that. Listen to that still small voice, that divine self, your higher self, and follow the promptings. And find that still, small, quiet, peaceful place where you can just relax and get a hold of what's really important in your life. We encourage you to do that. And we also encourage you to stay tuned to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan. Stay tuned. We are going to introduce our very special guests here on the program. They are going to share with us a fascinating conversation into a gentleman's authorship, if you will. He is an author. He's one of our guests, and we are going to continue this dialogue with our folks. And we have, I see what happened. There we go. Beg your pardon. I made a mistake and turned off my video. There we go. And the reason why today is important for me to have my video up, because one of our guests, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, he's going to converse with us. He is deaf. He cannot hear one word I'm saying, but he can read lips. It's far better than I. And his, I want to say his ghostwriter, so to speak, who is also one of our guests, is joining us here on the program. And his name is Paul. Let me see. I'm trying to bring something up on the screen because I want to show folks in our shared screen. I want to show them some of the work that you folks have put together. And we're going to talk to Paul Smith, who is the author of these books you are seeing going by. But the main focus of what we're going to be talking about here is coming up in just a moment. So stay right there. Parenting, leading with stories. Well, that's what this program is all about, is stories. And Paul and Kenny, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And there's the one we're wanting to talk about. 4 days with, it just flipped on by, and that's not fair. Be that as it may, we're going to pop out of that. 4 days with Kenny Tedford. And we thank you both for joining us here on the program. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's good to be here.
And Kenny, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us and sharing this time. This is, for me, this is extraordinary from the program standpoint. I myself spent a lot of time with, as a kid growing up and even as a young adult, with blind people because I was, at one time, legally blind. So I thank you for sharing yourself, your time, and your experiences, both with Paul, but also with us here on Tell Me Your Story.
Thank you.
Good. You and Kenny have more in common than we thought, because Kenny was born legally blind in one eye. His vision's not great in the other, but a little bit better than that. You both have some struggles that you've overcome. Good for you.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, Kenny, that one of the perspectives that I took very early on had to do with a philosophy that I took on, and that was this, that what I had, though I did call it blindness, that's when, someone would ask me, I wasn't visually challenged, I was blind. I was also a Phoenician. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. So I would tell people, Ah, yes, this was one of my first jokes that I came up with. I am a Phoenician blind. So
Yeah.
you pull the shades, and there you go. First of all, Paul, tell us about this whole aspect. I mean, you are an author, you're a speaker, you're a coach, you're a counselor, a consultant, and so forth. And your main focus is telling stories like Kenny Tedford's story. Tell us how that began for you. Why did stories become so important for you?
Yeah, well, storytelling in my professional world, I guess, became important as I was halfway through my 30-year career. And I realized that the leaders I admired most were really good at storytelling. And they didn't teach me that in business school. They didn't teach me that when I joined the Accenture. They didn't teach me that when I joined the Procter and Gamble company. And so welcome back, Kenny. Um, and so I set out on my own little personal learning journey to learn about storytelling. And I started interviewing CEOs and executives all over the world to learn how they're using the art and the science of storytelling to make themselves a better leader. And that ended up leading to my first book, Lead with a Story. And that led to a complete career change. So now that's what I do is I write books and teach people about the art and the science of storytelling to help them be more effective at work.
You know, it's interesting because one of the early series of interviews that I did with on this program back in 2007, 2008, which is when we started our program, September 7th, had to do with having guests on who were professional storytellers.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I remember them sharing with me was that the oral tradition was very important in the old world, if you will, depending upon how old your world is.
Hmm.
And that it was a tradition that was handed down from generation to generation. And that the technique was that you didn't just hear the story and then you tried to repeat it the best you could. No, no, no. You had to learn it word for word, and you had to tell the story exactly the same way every time. Otherwise, the story wasn't the same.
Yeah.
To me,
So
that's part of the
the
science.
original, yeah, the original storytellers in tribes, this is in the prehistoric times before the written word, before writing had been invented. That's the way people remembered what happened is they would create stories about it. And then the shamans and the storytellers would memorize the stories. And it's easier to memorize a story than it is to memorize a boring recitation of chronological facts. And so the art of storytelling they were the original historians and politicians and leaders were the ones who could remember the stories. That was the way they captured their history.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is something that you have done, obviously, in the process of teaching people, as you've just said, about the art and science of telling stories. Now, you refer to it as primarily in business, but we're telling stories all the time. Matter of fact, I got to thinking about uh, a simple conversation that one might have, similar to what we're doing right here. What Kenny might share with us as well, as we're going to have him do in terms of his story. But even in certain phrases that we use, we are painting a picture. It may not be a very a big picture, flamboyant, very detailed picture, but it's still a picture. I'm trying to think of a phrase that we might use, for example, well, let's say the starting of this program. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Well, I've kind of just told a story. Tell me your story. Speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
Your story. You, coming from you, and then story is that book that we might pick up or Kindle nowadays, or the technology. New, something that is something like a new car smell, or shiny, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Paradigm. You have to know what a paradigm is in order to know what it is we're talking about. And of course, a different view, a different concept, a different idea, a different philosophy for a new, shiny world where we live. So I've kind of already told quite a story just in that phrase, haven't I?
Well, I think stories can definitely be used in a lot of places, not just in the business world. In fact, that's why my second book was Parenting with a Story. It's about stories you tell your kids to teach them character traits and life lessons you want them to learn. I think the introduction to your show, I probably wouldn't call that a story. I think it was an invitation to tell
Okay.
a story.
All right.
But it in itself probably wasn't a story, in that it doesn't have a main character with
Okay.
a time and a place, and an event that happens, and a challenge and a struggle and a resolution. You know, in the traditional sense, I wouldn't have called it that, but it was definitely an invitation to tell
A
a
lot of
story.
parts. A lot of parts to a story then.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I'm thinking of in terms of my analogy, if you will, was more, I was maybe not telling a story, but more, I was sort of painting a picture.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
With those words, and that we do that. And so the words that we use represent symbols that hopefully we all have. Now, if we were using telepathy right now, this would be kind of a boring program.
Yeah.
But you and I would not lose anything in translation, because our thoughts, we would be painting the same picture with the same images. You'd see the images that I'm seeing. Now, how you interpret those images certainly is still up for interpretation by you, the individual. So that's where, when you start telling a story with all of these parts that you've described, it gets very complicated, in that how can you, there's really no way, and this is a question for you, there's really no way for you to tell a story, whether it be for business, whether it be as a parent, whether it be around a campfire, that everybody is going to get the same understanding or meaning. Correct?
That's correct. And that is one of the risks with using storytelling, is that there's a little bit more of a risk that different people will interpret the story slightly differently, which is a little bit less of a risk if you just tell people what you want them to think and do, you know, just bossing people around, or, you know, whatever. You know, you can communicate in prose a little bit more explicitly and succinctly than you can with story. But what you miss out on when you do that is the rest of the really personal human meaning, the emotional connection that comes with that, and the creativity that it unleashes, that storytelling unleashes. So there are definitely pros and cons to using storytelling, which is why I never encourage anybody to just use one or the other. You need to use both. In fact, I tell people, you're at work, your stories are probably at home too. Your stories should probably be 10 to 15% of the words coming out of your mouth. 85 to 90% of the conversations you have will just be normal conversation like you and I are having now. But 1 out of every 6 or 7, you know, not conversations, but 1/6 or 1/7 of the time that you're talking, you'll probably throw a story in there, which will add a whole new level of meaning and understanding and context to the conversation.
Yeah. I remember a joke I heard. I won't tell it, but I remember a joke that I heard when I was a kid, and I used to watch Johnny Carson on the Tonight Show. And of course, his opening monologue, da 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 da. But this joke I didn't hear on the Johnny Carson show. I heard it some other source. But it was one of those jokes that you could tell, and you could make it short or you could make it long. And so I would tell it a little differently each time, you know, and it would get shorter and longer and longer and longer and longer. And then one day, believe it or not, I heard them tell that joke on the Johnny Carson show. Now, I couldn't take credit for it because I heard it from someone else. But I just thought it was so unique that that joke had made it that far. But when we're talking about stories, and we want to share, let's talk about history, the story of our past. Can we even tell the whole story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, without writing a tome like War and Peace by Tolstoy? But how do we, how can you convey all of the elements that took place in an event, especially if you're telling it just from your perspective?
Yeah, well, you can't, is the answer. You can only tell your perspective. In fact, one of the lessons I teach my students in class is I tell them about something that happened to me when I was in the 11th grade, my first day of history class. You're asking about history.
Mm-hmm.
First day of history class, we got into class and the teacher was telling us all about how the class was going to work and 2 midterms and 1 final and all that administrative stuff. And right about that moment, 3 guys came bursting into the back of the room wearing ski masks, carrying guns, ran to the front of the room, knocked the teacher down, pointed the gun at him, stole his wallet, took the grade book off the desk and left, all in about 15 seconds.
Wow.
That was, honest to God, that was my first day of the 11th grade of my junior year of high school, 1984, Conway High School. And then after they left, the teacher got up, assured us he was okay, and said, okay, everyone relax, because that was staged. Those were my seniors from last year. Your first homework assignment is to get out a piece of paper and a pencil and write down everything that just happened with as much detail as possible. And of course, we're still just freaking out because this just happened. But, we do what he says and we write down what we remember. And he goes and collects all the pages and he takes them to the front of the room and he reads every single one of them to us. And Richard, every single one of them was different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the lesson was that if 25 17-year-olds can't remember accurately what just happened 30 seconds ago, how on earth are historians going to be sure about what happened 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago? And so my long-winded answer to your question is, of course, you can't express everything that happened from just one person's perspective. The answer is you've got to get more than one person's story about what happened. You need multiple perspectives to really understand what really happened.
I remember, and I'm going to share this and we're going to get to Kenny because he's chomping at the bit there to get started. But I remember I was taking a photography class in junior college back in 1979, black and white film. I was able to process everything from the negative all the way through to the print. It was fabulous. And I went to an intersection in my neighborhood where there had just been a car accident. And of course, I remember the old adage that you can ask 10 people what happened, and you're going to get 10 different answers, just like what you experienced in 84. And so what I did was, I went around the accident and started snapping pictures to get as many different points of view of that accident as I could. It wasn't for anything other than for me. That's what this program is about. For both Kenny, Paul, and our listeners who are just joining us maybe for the first time. This program is about presenting as many points on that circle as is possible so that you can have the opportunity to make new choices. That's what this program is about, choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Well, if you don't know those choices exist, you can't choose them. And there are people who live, especially in this country, who have been living the same lifestyle that their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents have been living on public assistance. And there's no judgment here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that because of the lack of opportunities that they have been able to take advantage of, that they didn't know were even there, all they know is this one way of doing things. Do you remember the story of holiday cooking? And the kids are in the kitchen helping, let's just say, Grandma cook, and they're going to have a ham. And Grandma gets out the pan to put the ham in, but she has to cut the ends off of the ham, right? And then she puts it in the pan and puts it in the oven, and away we go. One of the kids is really kind of befuddled by this and was asking Grandma, well, Grandma, I don't understand. I've been here for several Christmases, and you do that every year. You cut the ends of the ham off, and I don't understand why you do that. She said, well, it's the only way it will fit in the pan. So she doesn't get a bigger pan. She cuts the ends of the ham off. So what we're trying to do is give you a bigger pan here, folks. That's what we're trying to do. We are talking here with Paul Smith and with Kenny Tedford. And we're talking about a book, 4 days with Kenny Tedford, Life Through the Eyes of a Child Trapped in a Partially Blind and Deaf Man's Body. First of all, I want to welcome you again to the program and to the conversation that we're having here. I thank you for participating in the conversation, Kenny. How how did you first come across Paul? Because I find that rather interesting in that respect, because to be honest with you, there is not a lot of mixing of individuals within the disabled community from outside, unless it's something that you've been exposed to. I myself used to hang out at the Blind Center. I worked for a radio reading service for the blind and visually impaired as my first radio job. So, this is nothing new to me from that standpoint. And I got to tell you, some of these people are the most incredible, most intelligent, and most fun-loving. You say, by the way, you seem to laugh every so often. You're having a good time with life. But tell me about how you first came across and met Paul.
How I met Paul?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to twist it over to Paul
Oh,
because
okay.
he's the one who initiated the meeting.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, so we were both speaking at a national storytelling convention. He was on one stage and I was on another stage, so we didn't know that the other one was there. And then we ended up going to a third person's performance, and we both ended up sitting on the front row. And you have to imagine me sitting there on the front row waiting for the performance to start, and here comes this 60-year-old kind of round, balding man with a 20-something young man with him, and the young man pulls out one of the chairs and turns it around backwards with his back to the stage and faces this guy, Kenny, whom I hadn't met yet, and just stares at him for 5 minutes until the performance started. And I thought, well, this is weird. What's going on? And then as soon as the performer started, the young man started to do sign language. And so that's when I knew that the man sitting next to me was deaf. And I just thought that was fascinating that a deaf man would come to a 3-day storytelling festival. So at lunch, we had lunch together, and I met him and just began to hear his fascinating life story, which is what led to, me ended up writing his life story. But that was the beginning.
And what was it about his story that compelled you to write it?
Yeah, so the main thing was that, as that 1-hour lunch unfolded and I began to hear more about him being born deaf and partially blind and with a learning disability, and he couldn't speak till he was 10 years of age. And so you kind of have to imagine some kind of combination of Helen Keller and Forrest Gump, and I just imagine myself, if I was born with those kind of challenges, I would probably be a bitter, angry person. I probably would not be a very nice person. Mm-hmm. And, but the man in front of me was just the most charming man I think I'd ever met. And that fascinated me. And I really wanted to know, how could that be? How can he take on life with all of these challenges that I don't have the burden of having to work through, and yet be such a well-adjusted, kind, and generous human being? And I wanted to dig into that and find out more. And I did.
It appears that you also learned sign language.
Oh, well, a tiny bit, but
a tiny bit. Okay.
Mostly he reads lips.
Well, the three of us have something also in common, because back when after I had my lens implant and was able to drive, I was before I was learning to drive, before I took my test and got my license, I was taking, I decided I was going to take a sign language class. Now, the reason? My wife was blind. Well, now that makes absolutely no sense to most people, right? No, why would you take a sign language class if your wife is blind? Because my wife could feel my hands making the signs. And what we did this for a 24-hour period for each of us. Because we were very much into a spiritual process we were going through, we decided that each of us was going to have a day of silence. Well, that's not going to work too well for her, me being silent. So I needed to find another way of communicating. And even though I knew how to use a Perkins Brailler, that was a little, clunky. So she would feel my hands and so forth. By the way, I do have to give her, she is my former wife, I have to give her a lot of credit, because one evening we were sitting on the couch. She wanted a cup of hot tea. Now, this was her day of silence, and I accidentally spilled the tea in her lap. She didn't make a sound, not one sound. It turns out also that one of the other students in the sign language class turned out to be the driving test instructor from the DMV. He ended up being my driving instructor to take my test, my practical. Did not cut me any breaks, but he said I did fine. I want to go to you, Kenny. First of all, Kenny, thank you again. And let me ask you, tell us about your, and I'm going to use my term, perceived limitations. You have blindness and deafness. Tell us about those, and have you had them since birth?
Well, basically, if I could say, Paul, you can give me the time out, and when I go too far, I talk a lot. I can just jabber all day.
Okay.
And Paul, I taught him a sign language that he had to do to keep me to zip it, And it's like y'all do in football, time out. And I was born early, 2 months early, and born brain damage, legally blind, actually in one eye, but I can't see that well. So I had Coca-Cola bottle glasses back in the old days. You and I would know. I don't know if they call it back in your day, but my day, I was called the Coca-Cola boy. And they would make fun of me. Woo, can you see me? And I'd go, shut up. And I always thought they had a problem, but I couldn't really hear them. And I thought, why do they keep doing this? They have new binoculars or something? So my friend would laugh because they think, since I don't understand, they're not going to explain it to me. So I grew up thinking I was okay. And so because of the lack of oxygen, I'm totally deaf, my left ear. My whole left side is paralysis. I have little paralysis, can't feel much. So when I go out with my date, I let her slap me on the left side because it doesn't hurt as much. And then when my parents give me a whip and I turn my left butt in front of them, then father goes, no, we know about your problem. Turn the other butt around. So my life was basically because I would say the key that got me to realize that I'm okay, because my father will always call me his son. And my father even warned me that when you get older, people are going to pick on you, they're going to bully you. And then I thought, okay, but he did it with love. He did. And so my parents never called me handicapped, disabled, anything. They even at the table, my mother had 9 children, and I was the only one born with all their disability. And so Daddy would always get me do things, challenge me to climb up to the tallest tree in our yard. And he threw me into a lake. I thought he was trying to drown me because I was a bad kid. But there's a story when you read the book. All those stories are in the book. And basically goes back to because my parents treated me like a child of their son. Then I realized I was somebody's son. And both my parents died when I was 8, 5 months apart. Then we moved from Dallas to Memphis. Then my foster father called me retarded, stupid every day, just like the high school did, elementary. So that's basically where I wound up. But I focused on what my father told me. I try to keep remember, because when everybody else called me retarded, stupid, dumb, I don't know what it means. So I couldn't get upset because I don't know what it means. So in the book, Paul has a lot of stories in there. It sounds like adult stories, but if you read the book, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, you and I do share even more so because I went through the same thing when I was going to school, in grade school in particular. And I carried large print books. You ever seen a dictionary in large print? They're enormous. Yes. I mean, Paul, that's kind of like War and Peace. Yeah. And I bet you that most of the words in the dictionary are in War and Peace. I think maybe he filled in. But one of the things that I found so interesting as I started growing up and going into high school and then into college, and I only went to junior college. I've never been to university. I've been to vocational school for broadcasting. And then from there, 40 years of the school of, I guess you call it hard knocks or what have you. And I know we've all been there. But all 3 of us in this case, we've sort of come out the other side with experiences that now, through Paul, Kenny, you're able to share that a lot of people are going to relate to. How did you feel when the suggestion was discussed about telling your story, putting your stories down into a book?
Well, I was actually shocked, but the happiest man on earth, which Paul didn't know because we just met, having of my stories in a book has been a 30-year dream.
Really?
And so, yes, I used to work for Dollywood, for Dolly Parton. And I was a street character because everybody tells me I was funny and had a beautiful personality, you know, spirit. Because when I went to work for Dollywood, I saw an opening to collect garbage. And that's what I wanted. I want to be left alone. I'm used to being alone because nobody really hangs out with me, even my family. So when I went for the interview, I said I want that job, the garbage, picking up garbage. And the guy looked at me, he goes, I don't think so. And so he wanted me to go see part of the park. I came back. He said, you're the most funniest person we've ever interviewed, and you're not going to be a garbage man. You're throwing away your talent. He said, we're going to make you a street character. I said, I don't want a street character. He said, why? Because I don't like people. And he just laughed and laughed, and I'm going, okay, whatever. And so I became a street character. So every holiday, I play a different character. So I became an actor shortly after that. I went to college, got a BA in acting and my master in storytelling. Then I became a comedian, which I don't see yet, but I'm still working on it.
You so you're interested, if I can put it in broad strokes here, you're interested in the entertainment field, if you will.
Yes, I mean, I have another dream that I never told Paul. Most people I don't, but I would eventually love to be in Broadway. But I want to play what you call a walk-on role. You know, where I be a butler, you know, and I trip over, you know, and like you said, the tea spills over to the queen, you know, she's freaking out, and I go, oh my God, it's only tea, you know, and something like that, you know, the Christmas Carol. I'd love to be the man that died, Gru's partner.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I like to be him because he's got a short role, so I don't have to memorize many lines. I went yesterday.
Yeah, I would have to do improv because I haven't, even though I've heard the techniques for memorizing lines, you know, putting a word picture in your head so that you remember the next word and so forth. Kind of what I was sharing with you, Paul, about Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. If I can remember the symbols for each of those words and I keep them in the right order, I'll remember the words. I've also learned too, if you say them enough, if you say them enough times, you will remember them. And of course, that's helped me in that regard.
Yeah. So real quick, Richard, I don't want to walk past what Kenny just said and highlight that for your audience. I mean, here, Kenny is somebody who his teachers and the school board and most of the adults in his life when he was a kid told him that, well, you'll never finish the third grade. I mean, given your learning disability, your deafness, your partial blindness, like third grade is where you're going to top out. But he not only finished high school, got, you know, a bachelor's degree, and at the age of 55, got a master's degree in storytelling. He's one of only two people in the world with one of only two deaf people in the world with a master's degree in storytelling. So he's overcome obstacles that the world has put in front of him. It's just, he had to work a lot harder at it and took him a lot longer, but he's done it. And I think that needs to be recognized.
I would like to get Kenny's observations of the audience when you're telling a story. Are you aware of whether or not you have the audience's attention or not?
Many times, no, because the lights are off.
Okay.
And I like it, you know.
Okay, I get you.
But what I do, I play off, actually, it's the audience that I play off of. When I do high school kids or I do younger people, you know, they're in the audience, I can't see them, and I see two guys falling asleep or they're on their phone. I said, I became a character. I'm not kidding anymore. And when I tell a story, it becomes real because most of it is personal. It's me. Mm-hmm. And said, I'll never forget when I rolled the button for the first time and a bunch of black ones on the far back. Why were they sitting back there? And I walked over across the stage when I'm saying that, and I'm just pointing, but I can't point to those two. And they put down their phone and looked at me, and I just kept going, and they never took their eyes off of me. Because when I do storytelling like Cinderella, I play every character. The two stepsister. That's Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
Cinderella.
Cinderella.
Two stepsister.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Two stepsister. The stepmother. And I love to play each character. I don't have to be Kenny. And so I'm hoping, I told Paul about it, I love to do another book, but I want it to be children's fairy tales, but every main character had a disability.
Uh-huh.
Like I want to do a play on the Seven Dwarfs and play all 7 characters. Then I want to do a book. Part of that children's book is that, for example, the Seven Dwarfs in Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're going down the road, oh, hey, hey-oh, hey-oh, I don't know what to say. Hey-oh, hey-oh, I'm going to work.
Yeah.
Off to work we go.
Yeah.
Hi-ho,
Hi-ho. It's off to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all seven of the dwarfs, 2 would be with no disability, and all the other one would be blind. And you would see him in the comic book, in the book, where he's walking behind the wagon, and somebody got his arm, guiding him so he won't hit the wagon. And then on top of the wagon, be maybe 2 deaf people signing to each other and singing in sign language, and then one Down syndrome. But I tell people that what you see is what you get.
Yeah. That's true.
And whoever I see, I got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I meet you for the first time, and as soon as I see you, it never failed. Before you came on, I said, God, please don't let the man have a beard or a mustache. And 9 out of 10 of you always have a beard and a mustache. Now, I saw you, and I go, thank God he trimmed. And because you'll be amazed how many people don't take care of their mustache.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
I live by faith. I live with my spirit every day. And I think that's what gives me the joy of just, I'm still around. I mean, I'm almost, 3 more years, I'll be 70 years old, and I cannot wait. So I'm excited because now I can do stories about senior citizens and how much fun I have. Because like Paul titled, the way we titled the book, I'm trying to get my inner child to grow up, but he keeps saying, leave me alone. And so I just got to live with it. So I'm not trying to fight it as much as I used to.
Yeah. Well, I'm 60. I made it to 60 last June.
Congratulations.
I was thrilled. There's a wonderful line about change in one of my favorite artists' songs, and it goes, changes somehow frighten me. Still, I have to smile. It turns me on to think of growing old. And I used to listen to this particular song back in the 70s when I was a teenager. And I used to think about that. I want to jump back to Paul in just a moment. But first, Kenny, I want to ask you, because you've broached this already. Tell me about your, and I use the word philosophy because it's a broader construct in my concept. What is the philosophy that you grew up with as compared with the philosophy that you live by today?
Well, many people heard it, take one day at a time. Mm-hmm. But I am who I am. I mean, everybody wants me to get a hearing aid. They want me to get a cochlear implant. They want me to do this. They want me to do that. I didn't learn sign language until 21. And so when I fell off the cliff and broke my neck, that's when it hit my head. And then when I got cancer and open heart surgery and 2 strokes, then I realized in 30 minutes, even when I'm talking to you, I could fall over. You could fall over. Paul could fall over. But my point is, enjoy every moment you have in your breathing. Because just recently, I mean, in the past 7 years, on the left, my family, my mom had 4 kids. All of them are gone now. They all passed away. I'm the only one left in my family of the Tedfords. So I feel pretty excited that I'm still alive, because they thought I'd be dead a long time ago. Yeah. And I said, you ain't gonna get your whiz up, I'm sorry. But I try to be proud, even though I don't all the time, even though I still deal with depression, but that doesn't control me.
Right.
My philosophy, whatever happened to you, it happened, right? So look at it and figure out how to live with it, but you won't forget it. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget it when I laid in that bed and they said, you'll never walk again. I was paralyzed with my neck down. And then my best friend, Marty, we had a company together, and we did the Power of One workshop. And that was awesome. He was quadriplegic. And then he died years ago.
Mm.
And so when I was paralyzed, I could see Marty in his wheelchair by my bed and telling me it's going to be okay.
Wow. Paul, what about you? Now, you've been writing for how long?
Really only about a decade now.
Wow.
This was
Only a decade. Only 10
Well,
years.
you know, yeah, I spent 20 years doing more traditional corporate work, but yeah, I've been an author now for 9 or 10 years.
And I would bet it feeds your soul
Oh
in a
yeah.
big way. Tell me about your philosophy, what you grew up with compared to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a pretty traditional upbringing and followed the career path that I thought a responsible adult male was supposed to follow. My dad was a businessman and his dad was a businessman, and even though I had passions for science and math and astronomy, I studied business and got an MBA and got a corporate job just because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And it wasn't until about a decade ago that I decided to follow a more passionate route when I kind of fell in love with the concept of storytelling. And so I literally quit my job in my mid 40s, too young to retire, to pursue a very different career path and dream of being an author and a storyteller, and get to meet fascinating people like Kenny Tedford and write their stories. And so that's the life that I'm leading now, which is much more focused on pursuing a passion and being and creative and feeding my soul. In fact, I describe my mission now is in the 5 books that I've written so far is the odd numbered books need to feed my family, but the even numbered books need to feed my soul. So my first, third and, 5th book, et cetera, need to provide family income and fulfill, create clients for me and create a business model. But, the book on parenting and the book on Kenny Tedford, those are books to feed my soul.
Yeah.
And I think they're books I want to write to make the world a better place. And I'm convinced that Kenny's life being told does exactly that.
Yeah. Do you think that somewhere down the road, telling your story would be an appropriate opportunity for people to realize that that philosophy is an important one for everyone to take on? That, yeah, you've got to pay the bills, but at the same time, you can't get stuck in a job that you hate because it'll eat you alive. My father, who is 89 this year, mother's 86 this year, they're still doing well. They're staying sequestered. I will not go visit them until this thing is over. And they don't want me to either. Okay. So we're on the same page there. But he told me he does not like to be called a man of wisdom or a wise guy. But he was very wise in this phrase he gave me. Find a job you love doing because you're going to be doing it for a long time. Don't get stuck like me. Now, he was only stuck for a short time because he went on to go to junior college, got his computer programming degree in the 70s where they used fanfold paper and punch cards. Okay. And so we had lots of paper to draw with when we were kids. But I took that to heart, and I guess I was just in the right place at the right time because I got into radio reading, the radio reading service, and I was listening to talking books and recordings for the blind even when I was going to school in the 60s and 70s. And now I'm producing what they now call audible books. That's nothing new, people, please. But here I am today talking with the two of you about these incredible opportunities for people to learn, not only learn how to tell stories, but to tell their stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so to answer your question, there are certainly a handful of short stories from my life that I think are worthy of passing along to the next generation. And you'll see those show up in a few of my books. But no, my entire life story is not nearly interesting enough to write a whole book about. So you got to meet people like Kenny Tedford to realize that yeah, there are a few people in the world who warrant an entire book, and I'm not one of them, but Kenny definitely is.
Well, Kenny, you're extraordinary from the standpoint that you have allowed yourself to sort of be put out in the front window, okay, of the bookstore, so to speak, and to share a story that for a lot of people, and I've met a lot of blind people in particular, some who had some hearing issues, who are very private. They want nothing to do with the outside world from that standpoint. Look, my father, he's a spiritual guy, but I don't know much about his spiritual life, his philosophy, because it's not something that he shared with me or has shared with me, even to this day, because it's, I don't think he would put it quite like this, although he might. It's none of my business. His relationship with his God, with his creator, that's his business. And if he wants to share it, he will. And if he doesn't, I respect that. I'm very gregarious, and I'll tell you anything you want to know. So, Kenny, what is next on the horizon for you? What are you going to do? I mean, you've listed a lot of your dreams, but is there something concrete on your path? I don't want to necessarily say. So, is the book going to be made into a movie or a TV series or something? But what have you got going on right now that you're excited about that's coming up?
Well, I'm doing a motivational talk through the Board of Education for Special Education Teachers, and it's next month. And so that's in my hometown, Irwin, Tennessee, where they call it Unicoi. And so I'll be doing that next month. But it's my first gig since I got, whatever you call it, the coronavirus hit March 1st. Because me and Paul went on a 12-day trip, and it was the best time of my life when I was just bubbling. And we did a lot of book signing. We went to every town with our family and relatives and his family. And all I could think of then was, oh my gosh, what I just told you earlier, where I go, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And then my manager in California, Chris Lee, sent me an email. I'm sorry to say, but all your gigs and everything canceled because of coronavirus. So I'm just waiting. I'm trusting God. But again, I don't know what's ahead of me. I'm trying to learn the Zoom better. And I love to do workshops. I wish I could do, I don't know how you do, I think Paul's doing it, but short stories, and then people go in there and they got to pay to see it or something. I don't know. And then because I would like to do a CD for the blind, do it on tape. Even if Paul does it, I don't care. But read it from the book so that blind people can share the book as well.
Well, I will tell you that just as a side note, I produce audiobooks, as I mentioned earlier. And I've produced a few. I even produced a children's book by one gal who actually flew down here from Oregon. And in one day, because it's not a long book, we recorded in 2-hour sessions, and it was like grandma reading to the kids. It was fabulous. Of course, I've got my copy of the book, and I'm following along, making sure that, we're going in the right direction and everything's correct. And every so often she'd change the words, but she just kept right on going. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. She's the author. She can change the words in the Audible. It's not that big of a deal because the story is still the same. And we added sound effects and music, and it was great fun to do. So maybe we can talk about that at a later time. But Paul, what about you? What's on the horizon for you in terms of maybe another book? I know, of course, we can't travel right now, but that's going to change here soon, I think. And we'll be able to start to mingle again. There is one country, as of our conversation here, that's actually gotten back to normal. And it's kind of an irony. China.
Oh, really?
China has actually started to get back to normal. Now, there are still people who choose to wear masks, but everything's opened up. People are out and doing their thing because they got control of it. But apparently here in the United States, our independent streak has sort of prevented us from doing that. And we could have had this thing done months ago. We haven't had the leadership. We've certainly had the guidance from the World Health Organization, from the CDC, and we've been running PSAs like you would not believe for the 3 factors that I call mask up, wash up, back up. That's my slogan, okay? And
I like it.
If we just would do that, we'd be done. But we just have too many people that have bought into a lot of other theories and constructs and so forth that it's not that big of a deal. It's nothing worse than the flu, blah, blah, blah. In spite of as of this conversation, 210 to 15,000 human beings, not numbers, who aren't with us anymore. And that's very sad. Anyway, what about back to the positives? What's on the horizon for Paul Smith?
Yeah, well, if everything did get back to normal right away, that would be wonderful. But like Kenny said, when you're in our line of work, 90% of your income is generated from speaking and training engagements. So at the end of March, all of that came to a screeching halt. So I've spent the last few months, and I'm still in the process of building more virtual online products that people can buy and so they can hear from me either for a keynote or a training event or something in a virtual format, or producing pre-recorded training courses. And so I've got a number of different platforms that I'm producing for right now. So I'm having to shift my business model to be one that's delivered virtually, and it's a lot more difficult than you'd think, but it's working. But I'd still prefer to get back to normal at some point.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I love the fact that this whole Zoom thing has opened up opportunities for me that I never even thought of before. And of course, this program is going to be on YouTube shortly, produced up with music and intro and the whole thing, and look very cool, and giving you gentlemen exposure. Kenny, you with your new book. Are you thinking maybe? I know you mentioned before you wanted to write some additional stories. There was a phrase that I had thought of when you mentioned that. Now I can't think of it. Your child wants to tell children stories, and I think that's a great thing that we all need to get in touch with. Back in the 80s and 90s, they talked about our inner child, kind of thing. And what I find so fascinating is that from a biblical standpoint, and speaking of stories, biblical stories, there's this one phrase in reference to children. Come to me as little children, not childlike, not whining and complaining, but with that childlike spirit that you have, Kenny. And I know you have, Paul, and I have, with the passion and enthusiasm for just living right now in this moment that is so fantastic. So I applaud you for your dream, and I encourage you to do it. Obviously, Paul is there, that I'm sure the two of you can collaborate and put it together, because this is something that the world needs, not just right now. We've always needed it, but certainly right now it's critical. And I thank the two of you for sharing. Now, Kenny, would you say that this book that Paul has written, or ghostwritten, I guess you might say, for you or with you, 4 days with Kenny Tedford, life through the eyes of a child trapped in a partially blind and deaf man's body, is it just a series of stories, or is it sort of autobiographical?
Not sure of the question.
Yeah, let me take a stab at this. He's asking about how the book was
using
written.
big words again.
Yeah. So
you're talking to a child here. I may be near 70, but I'm a kid.
Okay.
Yeah. So the original idea for the book was that it would be an autobiography written in the first person from Kenny's perspective, and I would essentially be the ghostwriter. But as we got into working on it and talking to publishers about it, it turned out a much better idea was to write it in third person from my perspective, with each of the stories that make up his entire life. I mean, your life is a series of short stories, but that it also include my reflections on his life and my family. So the title of the book became 4 Days with Kenny Tedford, referring to the 4 days that he spent at my house for me to interview him from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night for 4 days to get his entire life story. But my wife and kids, were over my shoulder the whole time, like listening to this fascinating man tell these fascinating stories. And so now the book is, my wife and kids are characters in the book. I'm a character in the book because you see the back and forth between me asking a question, Kenny answering the question with that story from that part of his life, and then me reflecting on how does that make me feel? What does it make me think about my own parenting skills, my own humanity? My wife reflecting on that, my kids, what did they think about that? And how does it make them think about behaving differently at school? And then we go to the next story. So it really is a more complex thing now than just a simple chronological biography of Kenny Tedford's life. It is showing the impact that his stories are having on a real audience, me and my family.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited by the fact that it's out there for everyone to read, so that they not only get the import of each of the stories, but they get to know somebody who is, if you will, different from the norm. Although I'm sure, Paul, you've got some perceived limitations in your life too, just like everybody else. And it's all how we adjust. It's all how we cope with them, manage them, if you will, or see them. As I said, perceived limitations. I remember queuing up a record, black vinyl, for the first time, and wondering, how am I going to do this on a regular basis? Because this radio station plays music a lot. We have these music sets. Well, I learned to be able to grab the vinyl from the cabinet, put it on the turntable. Within 5 to 10 seconds, it was queued, ready to go. And someone watched me do that, and I was looking really close and everything, and they said, "But you're blind. How are you doing that?" And I said, "I have no idea. I just am." That just works.
Yeah, that's actually one of the major points in the book, which, by the way, we in the last chapter of the book, we try and summarize kind of the life lessons from Kenny's life. And one of those is about the fact that everybody has disabilities of some kind or another. So you mentioned it. So my disability is navigation. Like I can get lost in my own neighborhood. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my kids know if they want directions on how to get somewhere, ask mom, because dad doesn't have a clue. And my wife's limitation is mathematics. Like, so when the kids know if they need help with their math homework, ask dad, not mom.
Yeah.
You know, and so we talk about some of Kenny's limitations in the book, and then we talk about how we all have some limitations. We don't talk about them that much. We assume that, well, I'm normal, so I have normal functioning. Well, I don't when it comes to navigation, and my wife doesn't when it comes to math. You know, Kenny's just are a little bit different. So we all have them.
Yeah. And Kenny, you mentioned, of course, people saying to you, you should get hearing aids or cochlear implant and all of these different things. And I have to tell you, for 35, well, I shouldn't say 35, but as I reached into my 30s, mid 30s, I was trying to get a driver's license just to drive a moped. I could see well enough to bicycle. So I was bicycling to and from work and on and on and on. And finally, because I couldn't get them to give me the driver's license, I gave up. I said, you know what? Being legally blind and bicycling until I'm 65 or 70, that's not such a bad life. It's okay. And it wasn't giving up on a dream. It was just saying, you know what? I'm not going to waste my energy anymore. I'm going to focus on the things that are working for me, and bicycling works for me. Lo and behold, only a year later, as my vision was deteriorating, I got a lens implant, and now I'm able to drive. Technology finally caught up with me, so to speak, and I was good the other way. It was more of an acceptance, not so much giving up. It was accepting, this is the way I am, and it's okay. And then when that opportunity came along, I thought, shoot, why not? But in your case, you've accepted the way you are, and it's okay. It's great, right?
Yes. I mean, even now, I've got to get used to this, but I was in the grocery store the other day and I dropped something, and I bet you 5 or 6 people came running over to pick it up. And I'm trying to pick it up myself. And they go, that's okay. So we'll get it. I go, God, being old is not so bad. You know, so I'm going to take advantage of it, you know. So now I can tell somebody, oh, it's so far to walk with the car and it's raining. Can somebody take my key and get my car? I swear to you, 3 stock boys came up. I get it, Mitchell. I'll get it. And I go, oh, go away. And they go, oh, you're playing with this? I go, yes. I'm having fun being old.
Well,
because I never been old, so it's brand new to me. So I'm going to go and make the best of it.
There you go. I tell you though, maybe chronologically and biologically, but certainly not spiritually. Not that personality is not old. I guarantee you, you are that child at heart, and I take that to heart too. That I'm going to work. As I get close to 70, which is another 10 years away, as I get close to 70, I'm going to work to remember Kenny Tedford and the child that he was, and hopefully maybe when I'm 70, I know you'll be close to 80, so maybe we'll talk again then, because I'd love to find out how you're doing, what you're doing, if you've written those stories, and so forth. I really do like the one with the seven dwarfs, and six of them have the different disabilities, the different perceived limitations, and yet there are seven of them. They hang together, they work together, hi ho, and away we go. And I thank you both for being on the program today. This has been an extraordinary conversation of insight, information, as well as story.
Well, thank you for having us. We were glad to be here.
I appreciate it.
I want to ask you finally, Kenny, and I actually have three final questions for the two of you, which I'll share in a moment. But I want to ask, what's that?
Speak English.
English?
Use small words.
He means no big words.
No big words.
You're talking to my child, not this old man.
No worries. I'll use small words. I'm curious, Kenny, as to the question that I was going to ask you has just slipped my mind. So here's what I will do. We'll just move on to thanking you, the two of you, for joining us here on the program. Paul Smith, Kenny Tedford. The book is entitled 4 Days with Kenny Tedford, and it is available at through your website, paulsmith.com. No, it's actually Leading with Stories.
Leadwithastory.com.
Leadwithastory.com.
Leadwithastory.com. But you can find the book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those other
Absolutely.
things.
4 Days with Kenny Tedford. So the three final questions that I have for the two of you, and I'm going to bounce it back and forth so that one of you can think about the answer while the other's answering, and vice versa. So the first of three questions is, Kenny, who is Kenny Tedford?
Well, he's Kenny Tedford. I am who I am. I mean, I never meant to be anybody else. Maybe when I was younger, like a teenager, I wish I was real muscular. I wish I was handsome, but this is who I am. I mean, I just want to share compassion and love because I've been bullied much all my life. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I know what it's like for other people. So I tell people, when you meet somebody, I don't care who they are. I've had people come to me and say, "Oh, why are you crying? I'm gay." I said, "Awesome." And he looked at me like, "But you're a Christian." Who said, "I can't love a gay person. Give me a hug. Give me a hug." So I'm just saying that's how I see him. I didn't see him as a gay person, but if I did, so what? He's open about it. So I tell people, when you meet someone, take them where they're at. Don't change them. Let them be changed by you, if that's what you're trying to do. But let them make the decision, not you.
Yeah. Paul, who is Paul Smith?
Kenny Tedford's brother. I would say. I started out as his biographer, and then we became friends, but I'm pretty sure we're family now. That's where we are.
Well, I feel like he's a big, well, I can't say, I'm going to say an older brother, but he's a kid. I think he's only like 30 years old. You and I are up there in the senior citizen bracket.
All right, well, here's question number 2 for Paul. What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
Oh, definitely to make the world a better place, which I know sounds cliche, but that's why I left my corporate career. I mean, nobody ever stood up and applauded at the end of a budget meeting, and nothing I ever did at my office ever came close to changing the world. But I'm convinced now that through telling stories like Kenny's, that I can make the world a better place, one story at a time. And that's my mission today, is to make the world a better place, one story at a time. And Kenny's got a lot of them. So he helps me do that a lot. And Kenny, what is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
I hope to be able to, I guess one of my goals, which I share with people, is that I would love to go to every deaf school in the United States, even California, to encourage the kids of all ages. Your dream is there. If you have a dream, it's your dream. Don't let anybody stop you from doing it, because I've been told that so many. Paul brought up the word, or you did, the word normal. People would let me do nothing. I couldn't drive because I wasn't normal. And I go home and say to my foster mother, what's normal? She goes, why are you asking? Because nobody let me do this. I can't go swimming because I'm not normal.
Mm.
So anyway, they told me, I just don't understand it. But my focus of the book itself is my story would teach compassion. This country's so divided right now. We need to just listen to each other and be open, not judgmental.
Yeah. And the final question for the two of you, and I start with Kenny. Kenny, what is your life's purpose?
To teach people about love. I really believe my purpose. I asked myself that a long time, way back when I was young. And I'm finding out that it's to make people, I'm hoping I can make people laugh, even when you're hurting. And, but trying to let them see it in a different way. Find love, compassion, and forgiveness. And when you can do that, you're going to have a peace of mind. But I also let my spirit guide me. And so that's where a lot of people tell me when they see me, you got a beautiful spirit.
And you do indeed. Paul, what is your life's purpose?
Gosh, that is a huge question, but I'll try and give you a short answer. I wouldn't define it by my job, although I'm much more ready to do that now that my job is doing what I do now. When I had a regular corporate job, that wouldn't even come into the answer at all. But now that my mission through these books is to make the world a better place, I'd like to think that's my purpose. But I got a big purpose at home here with a wife and two boys to raise. And, a big part of my purpose is to make sure that they are ready for the world and the world is ready for them. I want to leave the world a better place through what I'm doing professionally and what I'm doing at home with my family. That's my goal.
And speaking of your two sons, this just came to me. Do they see Kenny as an uncle, a big brother, grandfather? How do they see him?
Yeah, well, you'll probably have to read the book to get the best answer to that, because it changed. It changed quite a bit. I mean,
He's trying to be nice,
honestly,
not to call me a grandfather. That's what he's doing.
Well, I mean, honestly, both of them, when I told them that, hey, there's this, 60-year-old, cognitively impaired, deaf, partially blind man that's going to come and live with us for 4 days, they both kind of freaked out in their own little way. One of them because he's an introvert, and that just, that kind of scared him. And the other one was, he's 7 years old or something and didn't care. But over the course of the 4 days, he just worked his way into our family's soul. And so I would say they probably view him as Uncle Kenny now. Whereas before he was just some guy that Daddy works with, who's kind of weird, different.
In a good way. A good kind of weird.
Well, at the beginning, no, it was a bad weird. It was, before they even met him, like they just heard that there's guys going to come to our house. But so the transformation over 4 days, and you see that throughout the course of the book, it just was amazing that, like I said, he went from being a stranger to a colleague, to a friend, to family in the course of 4 days, and that's hard to imagine, but that's really what happened.
Yeah. Well, I thank the two of you for joining us here on the program and sharing your stories. And I'm hoping that one of these days, on your tour, on your revised, revisited, resurrected traveling tour. And Kenny, I'm with you on this. I love traveling too. My wife and I went on a couple of little vacations with our truck and travel trailer, and I couldn't wait to get on the road. And we're supposed to do it around Thanksgiving of 2020 and Christmas, maybe, just to get away. I love doing it and meeting new people. And having those new stories come into our lives of these people. It's just, so I can hardly wait. And hopefully you guys can make it out here to California, to Santa Barbara, and we can sit down either across the table or who knows, maybe around a campfire. Would that not be a blast? And tell those stories that make the biggest difference in our lives. And again, I thank you, the two of you, for joining us here on the program.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
It's an honor. Thank you.
I'm Richard Dugan. I would also like to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices. to help make your dreams come true. Please pick up a copy. Go to the website, go to Amazon and get a copy of 4 Days with Kenny Tedford and find out more about Kenny and his life, and then look forward to more stories coming out from Kenny, whether it be solo or through Paul Smith as well. He's an author, he's a consultant, he's a coach, a speaker, a storyteller, and can help a lot of you out in that regard. And we will be linked to their website, so don't forget that. I'm Richard Dugan. This has been Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next, I can't believe I'm going to say this, broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love.